Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's BizPod.Ninja with your host, Andreas Penna. Got a very special guest here today, Patrick Bosworth. How are you doing, Patrick? Where are you? According to my title card, which I created, you are in Las Vegas. Is that still correct? How, just before we get into it, how's Vegas these days? I imagine they have been hit terribly hard with COVID. With tourism is one of the biggest things to be impacted. Is it a ghost town? I imagine it was probably a ghost town a few months ago. How is it? How is it today?
I wouldn't say that it felt back to normal because obviously you have people in masks and new protocols and things, but the retail is reopened, the slot machines are full, and then when you go out to eat or in the casinos, they're remarkably full. Now we're starting to see a spike in cases like everywhere that's reopened, and so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think the government just mandated masks while playing table games a few days ago, so it's definitely a fluid situation as the industry tries to adjust and restart the economy while remaining safe.
Great, thank you for that, Patrick. Yeah, it's a hard time for everyone. Just for folks and just for your little background, I had a little bit of a slight issue before, but I think we are both now on the screen. If I was kind of peeking down, looking, this is the first time I'm producing my own show, as opposed to having someone in the back end. So both of us should now be up, but I think everyone still heard you, of course.
Okay, great. It's cool if you were a little more featured in the introductory remarks.
So in case Patrick was muted, he is here live from Las Vegas, and he is a true business ninja. So we're gonna have 25 minutes. This is a weekly show, Truths from the Trenches, all things business, and I don't discriminate on which sector or which industry. So we're going to have every week all sorts of industries. And what's great about Patrick, he's truly a business ninja with a varied background of business experience, both in the US and internationally. Patrick Bosworth is a verified business ninja. He is the CEO of Royalton Investment. The firm focuses on startups within Royalton related to new business models in yachting, developing hospitality, and wellness projects. Patrick is also an advisor to Duetto Research, which is a company he founded in 2012. He served as CEO, president, and chairman throughout his tenure at Duetto until deciding to join Royalton. He led the company to significant milestones, including growth to serve more than 3,500 hotels and casino properties in over 60 countries. He raised over $140 million while serving as CEO from some of the top investors in the world, and he promoted his successor during a time of record growth and company performance. Previously, Patrick was an executive at Wynn Resorts, both in the U.S. and in China, I believe Macau, right?
Yeah.
Macau, and was an appointee in the administration of under the U.S. President George W. Bush. So he's got some White House experience. He's got some private sector experience. He holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a bachelor's degree in political science from University of San Diego. I think that's kind of you in a nutshell, Patrick, but I don't like to say that that's just you. You have so much more to offer. And way more incredible stories that we'll dig in here in a moment. Given you have such a unique professional track, Patrick, but before we get there, where did you grow up, and what led little Patrick Bosworth to go to the White House? How does one get onto that track? Like, who's Patrick?
I'm not sure I was ever on that track. I moved around as a kid, born in Newport, Rhode Island, when my father was teaching at the Naval War College. But he was in the Navy, obviously, and we moved all around. I kind of adopted San Diego as my hometown. And I went to high school there and then ultimately ended up graduating from university there. Although I also spent time at the University of Illinois. And so it was really that experience in San Diego that teed up the opportunity to work in the White House and for the administration of President Bush. I was helping to run a local affiliate of a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., focused on civics education. And I was getting a degree in political science. I had started doing research in support of a doctorate that I wanted to get even before I'd gotten my undergrad, related to what it took to create a modern democracy in civil society. And I was studying at Oxford, doing preparatory work for that. And I had an opportunity to go to Mexico for the Vicente Fox election, which was the end of a 71-year dictatorship with the Panistas defeating the Priistas.
I remember.
And it was during that trip that I really got it in my head that I wanted to go work at the White House or for a president. And that was obviously an election year, not only in Mexico, but in the US as well. And I was going to be running a seminar around the time of the inauguration. So I was already planning to be in Washington, D.C. for several weeks. And it's far too long to fit into this live stream. But through a whole series of different crazy events, I was able to become a volunteer for the inaugural committee, ultimately work in advance at the White House briefly, and then parlay that into a long-term job offer at the Labor Department. So Those were kind of an insane 3 weeks, and a story that takes a little bit longer to tell than is possible today.
And what was we'll get to the private sector, but I'm most curious, and I'm sure some of the viewers are, super curious. One, what did you do at the White House? And two, what was probably the greatest piece, like learning lesson, that you would eventually apply to your business career later on?
So my stint at the White House was relatively short. I was in the advanced team during the transition, and was based out of Blair House, which is the sort of diplomatic residence, or right behind the White House, but it's part of that compound. Yep. And I knew that I wanted to get involved on the policy side, and I was young, just out of university, and it became pretty clear that there weren't going to be policy job opportunities within the executive office of the president, which is why my contacts that were, big supporters of mine, like Sean Redmond and others, yep. They helped me get in front of Secretary Chao right after she was appointed the Secretary of Labor. And I had the good fortune of being the chief of staff of an enforcement agency there for about 4 years, overseeing labor union elections, and making sure that union officers aren't embezzling money from their unions. And what was really notable to me was that when you, particularly if you're working in a smaller little corner of the government that doesn't get a huge amount of national attention,
yep.
I was really surprised at how much we were able to accomplish. I'm really proud of the things that we did within the Office of Labor Management Standards, which was the agency that I was helping to run. We published a new regulation, defended it in court, taught the regulated community how to comply. I was really, you hear all these horror stories of government, bureaucracy and politics getting in the way of progress. And, I certainly have a tremendous amount of respect for Secretary Chao in that time period, for kind of giving me the me and my boss Don Todd the
Yeah.
sort of political cover to be able to do what I till today think was really important reforms that helped union members in this country. And it's always led me to want to get back into public service at some point. Just hasn't happened yet.
Great, thank you for that. And after your tenure there, you went to Harvard Business School, and soon after HBS, you joined the Wynn Group, Wynn Resorts. I think that's the proper way of saying it. Tell me about what you did there, and how did you expand Wynn? I think you were part of the original team that expand Wynn in China, correct? Or part of the team to help with the China Wynn Resorts operations, Macau, et cetera. Is that right?
Yeah. So the company was founded in 2005, and I joined in 2007. And so I was involved in the Encore openings in Vegas in particular, but also in Macau. My role evolved over time. So I entered into an executive training program for MBAs that to some extent, I helped create. There was an existing training program, but it was more designed for undergraduates. It was a rotational leadership program. I learned a tremendous amount in it. It was great. But I never completed the program. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people. I ended up starting getting pulled into, projects related to actually running the business. And as people likely recall, me joining in mid 2007, heading into 2008, the economic recession came up very quickly after I joined the company. That's right. So the president of the company pulled me out of the program and started doing analytics projects directly with him. That's when I met the co-founder of my software company, and he and I worked together to found a new strategic marketing team focused on pricing, distribution, digital marketing, database marketing, loyalty, a lot of related functions, all related to marketing and generating demand for the hotels. And as a part of that remit, helped the Macau team as well around thinking about transient demand and sort of the non-casino side of that business, which was small in the early days, but grew over time in terms of the importance of non-gamblers as that market developed. And it was a great education for me. I could not have had any role where I think I would have learned more over those few years.
What was that? What was the biggest learning lesson? And one other question I have, what was the biggest thing you may have learned from Steve Wynn at that time?
Yeah. So, there was a few. So focusing on the Steve Wynn aspect, I only started to work with him pretty closely towards the tail end because I also started supporting the business development team, looking at new markets, particularly around the U.S. So looking at Massachusetts and New York, Pennsylvania, and other markets that were opening up, and that allowed me to have more reasons to interact with Steve. And I like anyone, I was dazzled by his brilliance. There's a reason why he's credited with being, I think probably the most innovative person in that industry over, whatever it was, 40 plus years. And, when I entered the organization, as we started to make progress in some of the technology and processes and cultural changes we wanted to lead within the company, I pitched him on us basically spinning up a subsidiary company that he could invest in to basically create Duetto within the Wynn, universe. And, what was interesting is just how quickly he said, absolutely not. And described that while we were, smart guys, and we had done some great work for him, he was absolutely laser focused on what their core competencies were that differentiated them from everybody else in the industry around the physical environment that he was obsessive about, and delivering an exceptional service experience, particularly on the very high-end luxury side, and that he never wanted anything to distract from that. And that if they ever started to try to get too ambitious, taking on new sorts of things, even if they were good ideas, that they would take their eye off the ball from why he'd had the success he had. And that maniacal focus, I think, was the biggest set of lessons I learned, because everything in the organization was oriented around, just 2 or 3 pretty special things. And that ultimately led to the realization that Marco and I had to leave, because there was only so much we could accomplish inside one company, and we wanted to have a bigger impact than that. And I fully understood Steve's reasons for, not wanting to partner with us on that. And so it was time for us to go our own way at that point.
And that's when you started Duetto, correct?
Yeah, we started a consulting company initially, and it's easy to kind of rewrite the history a bit to kind of look at that as like, that was the incubator, and then the ultimate business was the technology one. But we weren't so sure of our path at the time. We wanted to test some of our theories that we had deployed successfully at Wynn, and make sure that they worked at non-casino properties and at other geographies and at non-luxury assets and so forth. And my co-founder Marco created this Excel spreadsheet that our clients were using with great success. And we started realizing that charging for our time wasn't ever going to make us much money. And we started selling the spreadsheet. Yeah, it's not scalable. And we started hiring people. And you learn that a services heavy business is actually a really tough business to be in, particularly in the early days.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone can relate to that, I have my own advisory and consulting, and I know how much hustle is required there, and it's really tough to scale. So that was a huge insight that you guys had about then figuring out a way to make this into a bigger thing, a platform essentially, right?
Well, and we had a wake up call when we were selling against software companies at a casino in Atlantic City, and we were selling our spreadsheet against those software companies, and we won. And they were paying us $20,000 a year to use the spreadsheet that Marco built. And we thought, well, clearly there's a gap.
How does that work? How does that work? You go and compete against a software, like, I assume some of these software companies are well funded. What's the angle? What was the pitch? How can you actually sell a spreadsheet over a platform software company's products and services? Like, that's amazing. What did you?
Well,
what was the pitch?
It's the same thing that's carried us to today, which is the software that's on the market that has any degree of scale and any customers was created in a prior era of this industry, the hotel industry. And it reflected the way pricing and distribution were optimized in the 80s and 90s with that sort of mentality. And what we observed was that online travel agencies in particular, and all of the related businesses like the mobile first companies and metasearch and so on, were recognizing arbitrage opportunities because of the inflexibility of the way pricing and distribution was managed. And that software became almost like handcuffs that kept you a prisoner to that old way of doing business. And we were pitching a new philosophy, a new strategy for how a hotel could distribute, price, market, and sell. And the Excel spreadsheet was necessary to do some of the analytics to back that up. But really what they were buying was the vision, because they realized that their profitability was eroding for the last decade.
Interesting.
And that erosion was accelerating, and that they didn't do something to fix it, that the industry would be thoroughly disrupted in another 10 to 20 years. And historically, it's been an industry with healthy profit margins, and that was starting to change. And so that vision was compelling enough for people to switch and pay a lot of money for a spreadsheet. But then, as I said, that became the rallying call for us to then go find a technical co-founder, raise money, and start the technology business.
Interesting. You talked about profitability erosion. What is the kind of the number one piece of advice you would give any hotelier globally about profitability? If they could focus on one thing, given your time at founding Duetto, all the insights you have over a decade of experience in this sector, what's the one what's the one piece of advice that you would give them to focus on regarding profitability in the hotel industry? Or is that too simple? That might be too simple.
Well, no, it's not too simple. It's just, it's such a dynamic environment now with what's going on in the world. I mean, my general thesis is that hotel companies have largely been led over the last decades by people that came out of the service operations side of the business or the real estate finance side of the business. And what comes much more naturally to them about how to impact profitability is on the cost side, particularly more on the service operations side. So like streamlining the headcount, looking at cost-effective ways to do renovations or to reposition properties and so on. What I've seen over the last 13 years at Wynn and in these last two companies that I founded is that with relatively small investments in talent and technology, with commensurate change management initiatives attached to it, you can radically improve the performance of a company through things like revenue management, distribution, online marketing, and so on. And there are a handful of companies that have really recognized that in our industry and have started to reorient their talent and their tech stack to that. But the industry's been really far behind. And so even in these moments of uncertainty, I think, again, this is a demand side problem. You have new entrants getting between you and your customers still. And now you've got trouble understanding which customers are willing to travel, for which purposes, what are they willing to pay, how do you reach them, how do you reassure them about your sanitation and safety protocols and so on. And I think that there's just tremendous benefit that hotels can have by being true innovators in that side of their business rather than only focusing on service operations and cost.
Got it. Thank you for that, Patrick. Now, tell us what you're up to today. Tell me about, so you were CEO of Duetto. You helped build the company, founded the company. You eventually took a chairman position to pursue other interests at this point, right? And tell us about kind of what you're doing today. What led to that transition, actually? What led to that transition of you founding, building a super successful startup company with top tier VCs to becoming chairman, and then saying, you know what, now it's time to pursue my next thing. What kind of led to that, and what are you doing today?
Yeah. So I think it was a gradual process of realizing that that I wanted to find new things to dig into. I think that there is a natural transition that someone needs to make in order to continue to lead a company that they founded. With my two co-founders, Marco and Craig were a bit more internally focused than I was historically. I tended to be a more externally focused CEO, doing, supporting sales, marketing, raising money, doing partnership deals, doing media, and so on. Over time, that was transitioning to needing to be, in our headquarters more and more and focused on scaling. And I was having less and less fun, is the honest truth. And as I had less fun, and as we transitioned the leadership team to be more of a classic sort of, a scaling tech business leadership team, right. I was feeling more and more burned out. And I think for a long time, I've wanted to get back into more of the creative process of taking what I've learned about what I think hotels should be doing and preaching to them about it and trying to convince them to go on a journey, versus me having control over a hospitality travel business and being able to do some of the things that I've seen as opportunities that I couldn't do from inside Duetto. And so as that realization started to hit, it's, call it whatever you want, but my shift in attitude or the universe or whatever just started delivering me interesting opportunities. And for the first time in 10 years since I founded our consulting company with Marco, those opportunities started sounding really interesting. And that became like an interesting insight for me, that all of a sudden these new things held some sway in my thinking. Marco decided to move on first.
Got it.
And then that accelerated my timeline, because Marco, I think, was going through some similar realizations. And then once he was out of the business, or at least out of an operating role, my co-founder, Craig, also expressed his intention to move on. And then as the only remaining founder left in a full-time role, I decided it was also time for me, and led a long transition out of the business.
Got it. And what are you up to today? So I get that. And I think I've seen that is common for a lot of founders, especially when they have co-founders. I often find that, you guys start something together, as long as there's a good team dynamic and growth and camaraderie. As soon as one co-founder leaves the nest, it makes it such that the others typically follow suit. So I have seen that. I've seen that before. And that's, I think, largely because of just the growth pains, or the way that a company has eventually evolved into something much bigger than where it started. And they're like, okay, now it's time to go start the next thing. So I assume you're on the next thing. And tell me about Royalton Investments.
Yeah, sure. So Royalton is the largest vertically integrated company in the yachting industry, owning shipyards, refit yard, 9 yachts. It has a yacht management business, so it owns yachts, manages yachts, charters the ones that it owns or for other owners, and then also has a brokerage business buying and selling boats. And
where's the principal place of business and operations?
Athens, Greece.
Athens, Greece. Okay, so you're focused on the Mediterranean.
Yeah. Well, so the yachts are anywhere from 50 to 86 meters in length, and we're building 143 meter yacht.
Oh, wow.
Yachts of that size are global. So
you can go
they
anywhere.
cross the oceans. And so, they go to the Caribbean, US, Mediterranean, Red Sea, Indian Ocean, and so forth.
Wow. So I imagine that some of your higher end yachts are reserved, or typically your clients are probably notable billionaires, I imagine, or around there, and plus or minus. What category of yachts is that considered? A super yacht or a mega yacht? Or I think mega and super, no?
Yeah, so I've been kind of learning the terminology, and it gets a little bit fuzzy, but in general, the industry refers to anything larger than like 32 meters being a super yacht. And then once you start to get above 50 to 60 meters or 70, you start to call it a mega yacht.
Mega yacht.
And then when you get above 100 meters, so like longer than a football field, it starts to be called a giga yacht. And so our yachts being between 50 and 86. And in fact, the 50 meters is really too small for us. And we'll probably sell it soon. Those larger yachts were solidly in the mega yacht space, and we're getting into the giga yacht space. So anyway, it's kind of obnoxious, but
I mean, it's I think everyone would be interested to learn that, because it's a bit esoteric, but pretty interesting. So what kind of compelled you to go into this? How did you get into being the CEO and starting and working in the world's largest vertically integrated yachting and chartering company in the world? How does that work from B2B SaaS hospitality software to something vastly different? And it's interesting. You went from White House to Duetto, and now to something completely different. You have a lot of tools in your ninja belt.
Yeah, I mean, I've always gotten bored with things, I guess. It's actually remarkable how long of a tenure I had at Duetto, considering my penchant for blowing up my life and taking on new challenges. I mean, I studied acting in undergrad, which you wouldn't see on my LinkedIn because it just confuses people, and was an actor for a while and ran a nonprofit for a while. And so I guess it shouldn't be that surprising to me that I decided to go into something completely new. Although if it was just in the yachting side, I don't think I'd be interested. And so my partner on that business, he's focused, he's got a team focused on the maritime side. What I'm really interested in is developing new businesses. So we're developing a couple different yachting membership concepts that I think will start to move quickly soon. We took a little bit of a breather given what's happening in the world currently, but as things,
Sure.
assuming things do start to sustainably open up again, we've got some concepts two concepts we intend to launch relatively soon. And then we have tremendous, between the group of us in the company, we have tremendous contacts and resources with governments around the world that are interested in increasing their tourism investment. And so I'm not really interested in developing like a standalone hotel somewhere. I'm interested in larger developments in places like the Red Sea or in Mexico, South America, where in partnership with government, we'd be developing infrastructure and really transforming a destination. And so that's what got me excited to join Jimmy. And he brings contacts and resources and perspective from the yachting side that I didn't have any exposure to. And then I bring a lot to the table given how I've spent the last 13 years. And so it was a natural partnership there. I'm also enjoying, though, particularly with the breather that we've had to take with all of those related businesses around tourism development and these membership businesses. I've been able to, take some time off and get involved in passion projects. So as you well know, working on a specialty chemical company that has a long-term non-toxic surface protectant that renders any material antimicrobial for 90 days. And so I felt really blessed to be able to jump into something amidst this crisis that's very relevant. And so, and to help a friend's business and to, help clients in the hotel industry and in governments around the world. So it's been a nice last 6 months since rotating out of my operating role at Duetto.
Wow. Thank you for that, Patrick. These are all awesome stories, huge accomplishments, super varied. I had forgotten about that you were an actor at the beginning.
I mean, look, my career never took off. I was getting paid to do commercials and made for TV movies and things like that. And right as I was just starting to get my big break is when I decided I was going to move on from it. So it's easy to forget.
All right, couple fun questions before we're at the tail end of our show. A couple of fun questions. Obviously, given Royalton and the fact that you have a large yachting business, where would be the two destinations you would go to in a post-COVID world if you could take a long weekend or a week break? Where would you take those yachts?
I had a really nice trip last year to the Aeolian Islands, which are we flew into Naples and sailed. We checked out the Amalfi Coast and Capri, and then sailed down to the Aeolian Islands, which are just north of Sardinia. And you have Stromboli, the volcano, which was erupting, and these very untouched, relatively untouched Italian islands that are just gorgeous down there. And I'd love to go back as soon as possible.
Beautiful. Favorite restaurant in Las Vegas right now? I'm assuming you can go. I haven't been to Las Vegas in a while, so next time I'm there, I'm going to take this note. I always like to ask my guests about their food, their choice of food and cuisine. So where's the best restaurant right now?
I'm going to be boring and give the same answer I would have given for the last decade, which is Costa di Mare in the shopping esplanade at Wynn. They fly in, the fish is line caught in the coastal waters of Italy in the morning, and then a jet is chartered daily that brings the fish alive or fresh from the coastal waters of Italy to Las Vegas. And It is an absolutely incredible dining experience with one of the top Italian wine lists anywhere in the world as well. So I've already been back since they reopened. I had a dinner there.
What do you order when you're there? What do you order?
The tasting menu. They have an incredible multi-course tasting menu. Go hungry. They always have like the most amazing fresh species of fish that you can own. Literally, some of this fish, the only place in the world outside of Italy that has it is that restaurant. So you can't find it in New York. You can't find it in France. You can't find it in Greece. And so whatever is fresh and amazing. I mean, they always have good langostinos from Italy as well. But it's seafood. So I wouldn't waste your time with any of the steak or chicken or other Italian dishes there. But put your put yourself in the able hands of Chef Walzog, and who took over from Chef Bartolota, and you'll have an amazing experience.
Amazing. Patrick, loved having you on the show. Thanks for everyone who are tuning in live, as well as those who are going to watch the show after it's been produced. Again, we are a 25-minute plus or minus show every week. BizPod.Ninja, exploring truths from the trenches with corporate development gurus, VCs, entrepreneurs, founders. As you can tell, Patrick's kind of a mix of everything every week. And I forgot to mention, show folks on this some gear that I got from one of my good friends, Gino Chapman. He made me a COVID-friendly ninja mask with.
Nice.
Look at this, Gino. Thank you so much. He is a. That's another ninja I'll have on the show eventually. He's an incredible artist, hair stylist, designer, and entrepreneur himself. So we'll get him on the show eventually. Everyone, thank you so much, and happy Friday. Let's just hope the world gets where we need to go in the next 6 to 12 months, and I have a feeling we'll get there. All right, everyone.
Thanks, Andreas.
Thank you, Patrick.
I'm gonna leave. It says I'm still live.